definitely bigger than the last one.
We're lied to about a whole lot of things in society. My years of research have shown me that in order to learn new things, you usually have to unlearn a whole lot of things first. That is so true. We have been inundated in so many lies and so much propaganda through the years that we really can't advance forward until we first take a few steps backward, get rid of some of the old baggage we've been carrying around. Only then can we move forward. And what I'm going to be talking about today is a very good example of this. The topic today is Einstein. Einstein, the fraud and the plagiarist. Einstein was a monumental, colossal fraud, folks. Everything he said was copied. Nothing that he ever said was original. He did not originate any of his thoughts or ideas, his theories, his formulas, nothing, none of it. It was all stolen, as I will soon demonstrate, from other scientists that wrote before him. Not only that, but most of his ideas, as it turns out, aren't even true. And yet, because he's become this icon, this canonized saint, if you will, of modern physics, nobody dares question the man. In fact, you will either lose your job or you'll certainly lose your reputation as a scientist, as a physicist, if you bring him into question. So everybody goes along with it, either because they've duped themselves and don't know better, or because they don't want to risk their career or their reputation. They want to still be cited in the journals and have their articles appear in periodicals. So they don't question them. They just go along with it to save face. And, the illustration I use is you look back in the Dark Ages. There wasn't one professor in any university in Europe in the Dark Ages who believed that the Earth was flat. There wasn't one professor who believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, geocentricity. Not one. They all knew better. They knew the Earth was round. They knew that the Earth went around the sun, and that the only thing that revolved around the moon was... the only thing that went around the Earth was the moon. They knew this. But, again, to save their jobs, and in that case, their lives as well, they would have been burned at the stake if they questioned it. They kept their mouth shut. They went along with it. They taught those fairy tales as facts. And it's no different today. The threat of being burned at the stake might not be there, but they certainly don't want to have their careers destroyed. So they keep their mouths shut and they go along with things that they know aren't true. Einstein is a very good example, folks. There are, like I said, not all scientists know that Einstein is a fraud. Not all physicists know that. A lot of them just go along, again, for the same reason everybody else does. But the higher up the ladder you go, and that number is increasing in recent years. There have been a lot of physicists that have sort of off the record admitted that there's problems. They won't come right out and say he was a fraud, and that he was, a plagiarist, and that his ideas are incorrect. They won't go out on a limb to that degree, but as you'll see, I'll be reading some quotes. Some astonishing admissions have been made in recent years, at least hinting in that direction. But if you look at the record, you can see why they're hinting in that direction, because it's true. Most people accept things because they don't look into them for themselves. What did Hitler once say? What a great thing for leaders that people don't think. People don't read. People don't research. They just parrot what they've been told. And so today, we're going to do that. Today, we're going to research. Today, we're going to look into the history of Einstein. We're going to lift up the rug, look at the lumps under there, and see, what's going on. What really lies behind this man? Was there any substance to the form, to the shadow, or has it been just a whole lot of hype? Okay, with no further ado, let's launch into this. But again, folks, we shouldn't be surprised. You know, we could cite numerous examples from the modern world, never mind the Dark Ages. Look at the NIST report. I like to keep referring people to that because once you look at the NIST report and the ridiculous statements that are contained therein, it shouldn't be a surprise to you to discover that even the most prestigious and widely respected scientists are not only capable of lying, but very often that's all they ever do, just to keep their jobs. Some people say, we can trust scientists. Scientists wouldn't lie. They believe in the scientific method. Sometimes they have more of a reason to lie than anybody else because their jobs are at stake, and very often very high-paying jobs at that. So, yeah, they're going to lie. Do you think you can trust the NIST scientists? It's a federal institution. Do you think a federal institution is going to tell you the truth, that the federal government engages in massive, whopping crimes? Get real, folks. When you depend on the federal government for your paycheck, of course you're going to lie on behalf of the federal government. You'll do whatever it takes to maintain your position, your status, your income. And that's all we get from this, folks. When it comes to the 9/11, the WTC building performance report there, it's all filled with lies. Let me just give you one example of how blatant these lies can get. In the NIST report, it was stated, quote, "We found no evidence of explosives being used at ground zero." Well, first of all, they could legitimately make a statement like that because by the time their investigation, quote-unquote, began in April of 2004, all the debris at ground zero had been removed and destroyed. So naturally they can say we found no evidence of explosives at ground zero. There was no evidence at that time. It was all gone. How can you even call that an investigation when all the debris had been systematically removed and destroyed? What kind of investigation is that? It's like going to a crime scene that had already been cleaned, wiped down, squeaky clean, all the fingerprints removed, all the evidence gone, everything cleared away, and now you're going to conduct an investigation at the crime scene. I mean, it's phenomenally ridiculous. But it gets worse than that. They went on later to state that they never tested any of the steel that they examined for explosive residue. We never found any evidence of explosive residue, but we never tested for explosive residue. Continuing our discussion here on Saint Einstein, the patron saint of physics. Is he what we have told he was? No, he's not, folks. Again, Einstein is hailed as probably the greatest genius of the 20th century. His relativity theory is so universally accepted around the world, not just here, abroad, that he is considered, it is considered academic heresy even to hint at questioning his famous equation, E=mc², or his relativity theory in general, or pretty much anything the man ever said. He's gospel truth. You'd be hard-pressed to find a university today, a physics class, that doesn't have a poster of Einstein hanging up on the wall. But, is this hype merited? Is his theory of relativity infallible? Is it tried, tested, and true? That's what they want us to believe. Like evolution. It's not touchable. It's absolute science. It's been proven. No, it hasn't. There's a whole lot of things in science that haven't been proven. In fact, they still refer to it as a theory, but yet in the textbooks, they act as though it's a given, that it absolutely happened that way. Most of science, I will argue, is that way. Most of it is theoretical. None of it is absolute established fact, or no, I shouldn't say none of it, but a great deal of what is called science today is not established fact. But what better example than Einstein? That's all you hear about. Everywhere you look today. Einstein, this, Einstein, that. Folks, it's a scam. And again, we're going to prove it today. And we're also going to talk about why it is that they would push him the way that they do. That's when this whole story really gets interesting. But, a theory is simply that. It's a theory. It's not fact. It's a hunch, an assumption. In spite of all the rhetoric, it has not actually been definitively proven, Einstein's theory of relativity, although most academics would certainly have us believe that his theory has been proven. But there's another question to consider. aside from the validity of his theory. Is Einstein's theory even Einstein's? Were his ideas original? Or did he simply borrow them, or better yet, steal them from others? Folks, that's exactly what the man did. This reverence that they afford Einstein, it's almost as though the man is incapable of doing anything wrong. In fact, a great many people afford the same kind of respect to academic leaders as they do to ministers. Religion, science is like a religion. People look up to their professors and their scientists as though they were men of God, and they wouldn't lie. Their word is sacred, and we can trust it. We really got to get away from this. The scientists have reached the status today of witch doctors, basically. Anything they say, just bow in reverent awe before them. And they use, of course, these fancy $20 words that nobody understands, so that kind of gives the impression that they really know what they're talking about. Even the scientists who do know what they're talking about, very often their expertise is limited to just one specific small, narrow area. But people tend to think that everything they say about everything is true. And we've got to stop this people worship thing. There have been psychopaths that have had PhDs. Big deal. PhD. Basically means paralyzed from the head down, because most PhDs are not capable of thinking outside the box. They're only able to think within the confines of what they have learned in the classroom or from the textbooks or whatever. It's disgusting. I personally have dealt with many PhDs over the years, and I got to tell you, some of them are knowing liars. They're going to tout the lies no matter what, to their dying day, even though they know it's a lie. They don't care. It's to their financial and reputational advantage to lie. But then there's others that are just downright idiots. A lot of them rode on their daddy's coattails. Look at George W. rode on daddy's coattails. Just goes to prove you can be a complete bumbling idiot, barely above mental retardation status, and you can still go to prestigious universities. Unbelievable. To sum it up in a nutshell, society's a fraud, folks. It really is. If you fall for the chicanery, you have my sympathy. It's all a lie. And unless you learn that, unless you learn how to dig into things for yourself, learn to think for yourself, learn to research for yourself, and draw your own conclusions, you are, ever have been, and ever will be a mental slave. And mental slaves sometimes are worse than the physical slaves. You might be free to walk the streets, but your mind is held captive. I'm not trying to lessen the suffering of the slaves during the slave trade, but at least their minds were free. Their physical bodies were in bondage, but their minds were free. They knew what was being done to them was wrong, and they despised it. But today, almost nobody knows that they're a mental slave. They're free to walk the streets, but their mind is held captive. They cannot think for themselves. They think it's heresy to think for themselves, to question the sacred pillars of science or politics or religion. They let themselves be hemmed in. In many ways, that's worse than the physical slavery. All right, enough rambling. I got a lot of ground to cover, and I'm already almost a half hour into the show. Okay, we have been told that Einstein and his thinking was all original, but again, this actually is not true. Einstein's original paper on special relativity, written in 1905, was called On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies. Interestingly, it gave absolutely no references. Now, that's a jaw-dropper right there. Many people aren't aware of this, but it's absolutely true. He gave no references in his first 1905 paper. In fact, he really didn't give any references in any other paper he wrote thereafter either. And a lot of people think, oh, that's because he was such a genius. When I was in college, one of my professors spent a whole lecture just talking about the genius of Einstein. And, of course, back then I bought it. I didn't know any better at the time. I wish I did. I would have gladly challenged him on that. I wonder if the man knew himself or if he was just parroting the same poppycock that he was taught. I don't know, but this is what's taught in prestigious universities all around the world. Einstein was a genius. Nobody ever thought of the concepts that Einstein came up with before. He didn't have to draw on any previous resources because he was just a genius. He came up with this all on his own. It's not true, folks. It's not true. But how in the world could he even have gotten his paper published in the first place, one has to ask, without references? Just as the case is today, so it was back then. It was unheard of for a scientific paper to be published, to be approved for publication, without giving due references. Einstein did not give even one. How do you suppose he got his paper published in the first place? Many of the key ideas presented in Einstein's first 1905 paper were known by scientists before him. Lorentz, for example, Poincaré particularly. He probably stole from Poincaré more than any other scientist. Poincaré had basically laid the whole framework out for what became Einstein's theory back in 1875, 20 years before Einstein came along with his supposed original ideas. Even Sir Isaac Newton, as it turns out, was aware of the concept of the conversion of matter into energy and vice versa. He wrote back in 1704, 201 years before Einstein's paper was published. He said, gross bodies and light are convertible into one another. Very interesting, profound insight by Newton way before Einstein. The equation itself, again, E equals mc squared, can be more rightly attributed to S. Tolver Preston as early as 1875, or Jules Henry Poincaré back in 1900, 5 years before Einstein, again, supposedly originated this formula. Poincaré originated the following concepts long before Einstein, not just E equals mc squared, but a whole lot of things that have been attributed to Einstein. For example, he sketched the primary version of the special relativity theory. He stated that the velocity of light is a limit velocity, i.e. that the speed of light cannot be exceeded. He first suggested that mass depends on speed, and by the way, a lot of these concepts have been proven either wrong or faulty. They're not always true. But nevertheless, Einstein did not originate these things. Poincaré did. He formulated the principle of relativity according to which no mechanical or electromagnetic experiment can discriminate between a state of uniform motion and a state of rest. Again, that's always attributed to Einstein. Well, that's just not true. Poincaré also derived the Lorentz transformation. Absolutely none of these things, once again, originated with Einstein. And yet, again, he is credited with all of them. As I said, a great many scientists have now come to that realization, but they're not very vocal about it because they don't want to risk their careers, folks. But it is now pretty much common knowledge, whether they admit it or not, that this is true. You know, if you can get a scientist alone in a back room, you know, you'll probably get him to nod his head in agreement, but they won't make a public statement about it. A few have, but very, very few. Anyway, as stated, Einstein never gave references in his papers, you know, giving the impression that his work was original. This is openly acknowledged by some of his most loyal fans. For example, in the book Einstein, The Life and Times by Ronald W. Clark, we read this comment. On the electrodynamics of moving bodies, his first paper, it is in many ways one of the most remarkable scientific papers that had ever been written. Even in form and style, it was unusual, lacking the notes and references which give weight to most serious expositions. Did you catch that? He said what was most remarkable about it wasn't its originality, wasn't the deep scientific insight that it provided. He said what was most remarkable about it is the fact that it was published at all without any references being made. Isn't that interesting? This is an Einstein fan who said this. That's the one thing that stuck out in his mind, most remarkable about Einstein's paper, folks. It was published without references. So here, he's kind of telling you in a subtle way that the man was a fraud. Of course he was. Seeing that Einstein, and you got to wonder, how could that be? Obviously, the man had some backroom connections, didn't he, that would get his paper published without references. It's unheard of. Anyway, seeing that Einstein was a patent clerk, that's what he had worked as, early on, up until 1909, in fact, several years after his first paper was published, he was still working as a patent clerk. Excuse me. But since he was a patent clerk, it would be expected that he would go above and beyond the call of duty when it came to giving references. He, more than anybody else, knew better. Again, why didn't he do it? Can it be that he didn't want people to know that he was in fact copying, that he wasn't originating his ideas? It's obvious. Yes, that is why. But again, even more strange is the fact that Einstein's paper was so readily recognized and received by the scientific community without these references. Was there a special exception being made for him for some unknown reason? There was, and we'll get into that in a little bit as to why he was so widely received, so readily received. In 1956, Max Born acknowledged this fact as being most unusual. He wrote, "The striking point is that Einstein's paper contains not a single reference to previous literature." So you see many scientists, many authors, many researchers have been bringing this point out. It is astonishing, folks. It's not to be taken lightly. I can't stress enough, how bizarre this is. If you know anything about scientific papers, you know that it's just not going to happen. You're never going to get them published without references. In fact, it's that way with pretty much any academic paper. You're not going to get published as a historian if you don't give references. Otherwise, how does somebody know you're just not making this stuff up? You have to give references, sources. Where are you getting this material from? Even if your thought is original, you have to have derived some of your thinking from other sources that led you to this conclusion in the first place. What are those sources? Where did you get it from? Nobody's thoughts are that original. Not even Einstein. We've been told that he is the only one that came up with something totally original. No, it's not true, folks. It is a fairy tale. James McKay had this to say on the matter. Einstein's explanation is a dimensional disguise for Lorenz's. Thus, Einstein's theory is not a denial of, nor an alternative for, that of Lorentz. It is instead only a duplicate and disguise for it. Einstein continually maintains that the theory of Lorentz is right, only he disagrees with his interpretation. Is it not clear, therefore, that in this case, as in other cases, Einstein's theory is merely a disguise for Lorentz's, the apparent disagreement about interpretation being only a matter of words alone? There you go, folks. Only a matter of words. Einstein was trying to brush it off, trying to explain it away, trying to justify the similarities, because as time went on, people were starting to question things. He was trying to make it out like, oh, okay, well, Lorentz did kind of come up with some of these ideas, but I expanded on them and took them miles ahead of anything he ever took it to. I took it to new heights. No, we didn't. No, we didn't. Nothing Einstein ever said was original. Very important to drive this point home, because this is leading up to something very sleazy that's going on in our world today. Anyway, not only did Einstein not give credit to Poincaré or make reference to him, but he claimed to have never even heard of Poincaré or read his writings. This had to be a blatant lie, folks. And we must also conclude that the academic community in defense of Einstein's pretentious originality, is also lying to us as well. To save face, Einstein made this revealing statement in his 1907 paper. He said, "It appears to me that it is the nature of the business that what follows has already been partly solved by other authors. Despite this fact, since the issues of concern are here addressed from a new point of view, I am entitled to leave out a thoroughly pedantic survey of the literature." Did you catch that? He was claiming that, he knew that the gig was up with some people anyway, that they were starting to catch on to his plagiarism. So he said, well, since my ideas are new, I don't have to give references to any literature that I've consulted. Wait a minute. No. First of all, who the heck does this man think he is? You can't do that. It's unheard of. He got away with it, but that doesn't make it acceptable. Obviously, some sleazy politics was going on. Einstein, in the last quote I just read before the break, Einstein was making the claim that, trying to exonerate himself. Oh, because my ideas are new, I don't have to give references. Well, first of all, you always have to give references. He was pulling a fast one here. But the point is, his ideas weren't new. I mean, all he did was just rearrange them in a different format. It's kind of like saying, instead of saying the house is white, I could say, white is the color of the house. See? My idea is new. I worded it a different way. I'm original. So I don't have to give reference to the person who first said the house is white. I mean, come on. That's basically what this guy did. What a bunch of chicanery. Webster's 1947 definition of the word plagiarism reads as follows: to steal or purloin and pass off as one's own the ideas, words, artistic productions, etc. of another, to use without due credit the ideas, expressions, or productions of another. So there you go. That's all Einstein ever did, folks. And he basically admitted it in the previous quote I just read, but he tried to still make it look, he tried to justify it by trying to make it out to look like he was originating these ideas. No, he wasn't. Only many years later, in 1935, in his paper, Elementary Derivation of the Equivalence of Mass and Energy, did Einstein admit that, quote, the Lorentz transformation is the real basis of special relativity theory. He finally admitted it, only in 1935, years later, after he had already won world recognition, fame, and adoration, did he make this one passing statement. But by then it was too late. It didn't matter. He had already become, the patron saint, if you will, of physics. He lied, folks. Absolutely lied. He lied his way to the top, but he didn't do it alone. In fact, he never would have been able to pull it off if he didn't have a lot of help in high places, which I'll be getting to shortly. It's interesting to note, though, few people realize this, but whenever confronted by other scientists who didn't agree with his position, Einstein absolutely vehemently refused to debate with them. Did you know that? During his entire career, Einstein never debated with any other scientists. In fact, he always gave the reason, oh, I'm just not competent in that area. I don't have good debating skills. I'm not good at wording myself. The truth is, folks, he never debated because he actually didn't even understand the concepts that he was parodying. All he did was memorize things that he had read and repeat them verbatim, or maybe change the words around a little bit so it sounded original, so nobody could tell that he was actually plagiarizing. Or so that nobody could nail him if they ever called him out on the carpet. But he would not debate because he couldn't debate. Yeah, he's right, he couldn't debate, not because he didn't have debating skills, but because he didn't understand the concepts that he was talking about. And guess what he labeled scientists who pressured him to explain certain things or to answer certain questions that he refused to answer? Or if they, accused him of being a plagiarist. You know what he called them? He used the same word every time. Can you guess? Anti-Semitic. Yes, he pulled the anti-Semitic trump card. When you can't answer questions, and you have a last name that ends in Stein or Berg, the last hope you can always fall back on is call the person anti-Semitic. Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. Respectable scientist? Hardly. It appears that Einstein's refusal to debate, again, was due to the fact that he didn't even understand any of the concepts that he was talking about. He was, again, just parroting them, just like I said. The Encyclopedia Britannica says of Einstein's early education, now this is important to understand this. Einstein, folks, not only was a plagiarist, not only were his ideas not so sound and tested and true as we've been told, but are you ready for this one? I hope you're sitting down. Einstein, ladies and gentlemen, was a bumbling idiot. Einstein, far from being the great genius that we were told he was, Einstein was an academic fraud and a failure. He was, in fact, an idiot. The Encyclopedia Britannica, as I stated, says of Einstein's early education that he, quote, showed little scholastic ability. It also says that at the age of 15, quote, with poor grades in history, geography, and languages, he left school with no diploma. That's interesting that he did bad in languages. Because if you're not good in languages, chances are you're not going to be good in mathematics. The same part of the brain that handles cognitive reasoning from math is what you use for languages. If you're not good at one, usually you're not good at the other. The two usually go hand in hand. Oh, but don't worry. It turns out he was terrible in math, too. Let me continue. Einstein himself wrote in a school paper of his, talking about his, and I quote, lack of imagination and practical ability. Those are his words, his summation of himself. He said that he had, quote, a lack of imagination and practical ability. This is his own assessment of his own self on a paper that he wrote. In 1895, Einstein failed a simple entrance exam to an engineering school in Zurich. This exam consisted mainly of mathematical problems, and Einstein showed himself to be mathematically inept in this exam. This is 10 years before his first paper came out without references. You getting the picture here? He plagiarized the paper, didn't understand anything of what he was talking about, just parroted it. The man was a bumbling idiot, folks. He couldn't even handle a basic entry-level mathematics test to go into an engineering school. He was turned down. This is just 10 years before his first paper came out. How did he go from being a bumbling mathematical idiot to a supposed world-renowned genius in just 10 years? Oh, but it gets worse than that. After he was turned down from entrance into the Zurich engineering school, he then entered a lesser school, hoping to use it as a stepping stone to the engineering school that he could not get into. But after graduating in 1900, he still could not get a position at the engineering school. This is only 5 years before his paper came out now. 5 years since he was first turned down, he went to school for 4 years, and still the man is a bumbling idiot, can't get into the school, can't pass the entrance exam for basic mathematical, a basic mathematics test. He could not pass it just 5 years before his paper came out. Unable to go to the school as he wanted, he got a job with the help of a friend at the patent office in Bern. He became a technical expert third class, which meant that he was not even competent to hold a higher qualified position in that capacity. In just a few years' time, we're told, his first scientific paper was published. He was only given third-class status at the patent office, folks. He still wasn't able to get into the school that he wanted for engineering, couldn't pass the basic entry-level mathematics course, and yet within just a few years he got his paper published and suddenly now emerges as a genius. How is that possible, I dare ask? How did this bumbling academic idiot become a first-rate genius in just a few years' time. It's not possible, folks. We have been sold another rotten bag of goods. I tell you, if you look deep enough and long enough, eventually you'll discover that just about everything you've ever been told and held sacred and pure is a fraud. The one thing, more than anything else, that gave Mr. Albert Einstein his world was something that took place in 1919, a solar eclipse. Got to give you a little background on this. Einstein supposedly predicted, according to his theory of relativity, Einstein predicted that that a phenomenon would take place during an upcoming solar eclipse in 1919, and the whole world was in awe when supposedly his prediction was confirmed in 1919. He said that because of the gravitation of the sun, it would act as a lens and bend the light of a star that was supposed to be behind the sun at the time of the eclipse. But the gravity of the sun would bend the light and make it look like the star was a few degrees away from the sun. It would be visible because of the sun's gravity bending like the star. Much like if you put a pencil in a clear glass of water. That a clear glass that you can see through. You put the pencil in, it looks like the part of the pencil that's in the water is displaced like a half an inch from where the pencil actually is. You know what I'm talking about? It's the water bends the light of the pencil, so it makes it look like it's in a different spot from where it actually is. It's like a lens bending the light. Well, that's what Einstein said was going to happen with the light from the star. The sun's gravity would bend it so it looked like you could see it in a spot where it really wasn't. It was behind the sun. This is, to this day, most people believe that this actually took place in 1919, that Einstein's theory was confirmed, and everybody hailed him and bowed before the great Einstein when supposedly his theory was confirmed. It wasn't, folks. It wasn't confirmed. It's a lie. They fabricated the data. This eclipse supposedly took place, or did take place, but the phony experiment supposedly, confirming Einstein's theory was May 29th, 1919. Again, it never happened. Arthur Eddington faked the data. Let's look at what he said himself about his observations on this day. From his own recollections, his own diary. May 29th, he said, began with heavy rain, which stopped only about noon. Not until 1:30 p.m., when the eclipse had already begun, did the party get its first glimpse of the sun. We had to carry out our program of photographs on faith. It looked as though the effort might have been abortive. We developed the photographs 2 each night for 6 nights after the eclipse. The cloudy weather upset my plans, and I had to treat the measures in a different way from what I had intended. Consequently, I have not been able to make any preliminary announcement of the results. Extreme difficulties were encountered, he stated, yet we were told the whole that Eddington, the one who carried out the alleged experiment that proved Einstein's theory, don't forget, this is a friend of Einstein, he admitted himself that it was rainy, cloudy, they could barely see the sun itself, never mind a star nearby. But not only that, but in 2002, an internet article posted by the British Institute of Precise Physics revealed that the CAT cameras used in the 1919 expedition, this was, in Africa where they had gone to view the eclipse, The cameras used in this expedition were accurate to only 1/25th of a degree. Isn't that interesting? Not only were the weather conditions not favorable to even conduct this type of in the first place, but there was only a 1/25th accuracy, 1/25th of a degree accuracy with the CAT cameras that we used in the first place. The bottom line is simply this, though, folks. Eddington was not interested in testing Einstein, but only in proving Einstein, proving him right. That's all he was interested in. This whole thing was a setup. He lied. He forged the evidence. Many scientists now admit the 1919 confirmation, eclipse confirmation of Einstein's theory is just not tenable. But nevertheless, as a result of this 1919 prediction, quote unquote, Einstein's popularity soared to cult status. His name was now etched in stone. That's it. Forevermore now he shall be, glaring in the spotlight. Glaring in the spotlight. Einstein himself acknowledged this. In a letter that he wrote to his longtime friend and confidant, Heinrich Zanger, in mid-December of 1919, this is what Einstein said: "The newspaper drivel about me is pathetic. This kind of exaggeration meets a certain need among the public, really a harmless ideology." Notice, in the early stages, Einstein actually didn't like what was going on. Or maybe he liked it, but he was recognizing it as pathetic, the way that they were groveling over him. But as time went on, that changed. He began to revel in it and take advantage of it. But I do need to point out, it wasn't Einstein's intention necessarily from the beginning to make himself such a hero. Maybe just simply because he was nervous. He didn't want to be in the spotlight because he knew he couldn't explain his alleged original theories. He couldn't answer questions. So he was getting a little nervous with this fame. But don't worry, he had friends in high places that took care of him. They sailed him right through those storms. In any case, in another letter to Zanger, dated December 24th, 1919, here's another statement Einstein made. This business, of the media gloating over him, this business reminds one of the tale of the emperor's new clothes, but it is harmless tomfoolery. Notice now, he went from calling this pathetic, now he's calling it, well, it's just harmless tomfoolery. He went from pathetic to harmless tomfoolery. Now, well, I guess it's no big deal after all. He went on to say, the disparity between what you are and what others believe, or at least say about you, is far too great. Did you catch that? Einstein himself admitted that there was a huge gap, a big gaping chasm between what he really was and what the public was saying about him. Folks, I want to repeat it. Einstein, far from being a genius, was an idiot. Far from being original, was a plagiarist. Far from coming up with great scientific theories, the theories are filled with holes. They're not written in stone. They're not unquestionable. There's plenty of reason to question them. And in recent years, the theory of relativity and the constancy of the speed of light have been competently brought into question. Most of this stuff has been suppressed, but the evidence is mounting. These theories are not tried, tested, and true. Anyway, let me continue on here. On January 3rd, 1920, Einstein wrote these words to his friend Zanger. He said, as for me, since the light deflection result, referring to the 1919 eclipse, so-called confirmation of his theory, since it became public, he said, such a cult has been made out of me that I feel like a pagan idol. So there you go. Ever since this 1919 solar eclipse, in which his friend forged data to make Einstein's prediction look real, look legitimate, he said there's been a huge cult formed around me that makes me feel like a pagan idol. Cult. And folks, the cult still persists to this day. It's like Mormonism. This crazed madman, Joseph Smith, comes up with this phony idea that anybody with half a brain could see through. But nobody speaks out about it. They support it because, well, for one thing, it probably was bringing a lot of money in, and it was a great system of controlling people. Put blind faith in it and adhere to it as though it's so, true and worthy of our belief, and the great icon, the great leader, Joseph Smith, the prophet. This cult has been built around it. But it's a fraud. An absolute fraud. The guy just made this up conveniently. Oh, I lost the golden plates that I found these writings on. Come on, knock it off. Well, so it is with Einstein. It's the same thing. The story builds, and next thing you know, it's just out of hand. It's out of control. Nobody can stop it, even the creators of it. But they don't care because, hey, it's very profitable, and we've built this little fantasy view around it. Now we can sell books and videos, and, on and on and on it goes. Kind of like the Holocaust mania, wouldn't you say? You create this lie, and the next thing you know, woo, you get a big tourist industry going. Plus, we can use the Holocaust hysteria as great propaganda to manipulate people so they don't know that we're victimizers instead of victims as we kill Palestinians every day, at our leisure. It's so disgusting how this world works. But Einstein is just another fairy tale, folks, another fraud that has been pawned off on us, and it's time that we snap out of it. Exalting Einstein to cult status may not have been Einstein's original idea, as I stated, but it certainly was the idea of the Jewish-run, or should I say Zionist-run press of the day. On February 1st, 1917, a Jewish journalist, friend of Albert Einstein, Alexander Moskowski, wrote these words in a letter to Einstein. He said, "Regardless of what happens, I would like to continue the cult, the Einstein cult. For you it is secondary, but for me it is of paramount importance in life. Additionally, I have the encouraging feeling that with my modest writing abilities, I may also serve the cause once in a while." Zionist-run media that has made a hero out of Einstein. They wanted an icon. But it was the Zionist community, more than Einstein himself, of course. Einstein couldn't have done this single-handedly. He had to have help from high places, and that's what those high places were. That's how he became the great icon of physics that he has become. The Zionists who control our media, they control the academic community, they control the entire government. They're the ones that gave him this fame. That's how you can be a bumbling idiot and become a great icon in science. That's how you can be a bumbling idiot and become president, i.e. George Bush. It's possible, folks, if you have the right connections and kiss the right behinds. But some would say, well, no, wait a minute, Einstein seemed like a relatively moral person. I've read some of his quotes, and he seemed to be almost a godly type man. Was he? Well, one of the best ways to tell what a person is like is to look at his family life. How was he with his wife? How was he with his kids? Nobody's perfect, but, was he at least doing his best? Was he there for his kids? Was he doing his best to try to help them out? Let's take a look at the life of Einstein. That'll tell us a little bit about his trustworthiness as a scientist. A year before they married, Mileva Marek gave birth to a daughter, Lacerle, while Einstein was away. The child's fate is actually unknown. She is presumed to have been given up for adoption. Nobody really knows for sure. Perhaps under pressure from Einstein himself, who knows? But it is believed that he had never even seen his firstborn, that she was given up for adoption before he even saw her. After the marriage, Mileva bore 2 more sons, but the family was not to stay together. Einstein began an affair with his cousin Elsa Lorenthal, who on a trip to Berlin in 1912, while on a trip to Berlin in 1912, leaving Mileva and his family 2 years later. Einstein and Mileva finally divorced in 1919, but not until after Einstein sent his wife a list of conditions, quote-unquote, under which he was willing to remain married. The list included such autocratic demands as you are neither to expect intimacy nor to reproach me in any way. I'll stay married to you if you don't expect intimacy and if you don't reproach me in any way. Hey, this sounds like the Rambouillet Accords given to the Serbian parliament as demands that were to be met so that we won't bomb you. NATO told them that NATO soldiers are to be given free access to any facility they desire. If they commit any crimes on your soil, they're not to be held liable. Can you freaking believe this? That's why Kosovo was bombed in '99, folks. Because the obstinate Serbian parliament wouldn't agree to those simple and harmless demands. Unbelievable. Anyway, this is the real Einstein, folks. After the divorce, he saw little of his sons thereafter. In fact, the eldest, Hans Albert, later reflected, quote, probably the only project he ever gave up on was me. That's what his own son said about him. The younger, Edward, was diagnosed with schizophrenia and died in an asylum, apparently never having even been visited by Einstein. Einstein married Elsa soon after the divorce, but a few years later began yet another affair with Betty Newman, the niece of a friend. You know, this sounds a lot like another very prominent Zionist from history, Mr. Karl Marx, who had a similar track record, and yet he achieved universal fame and acclaim, and to this day is revered by many people, all because of the Zionist-owned press, of course. But let's look at some more problems. We've looked at Einstein's plagiarism. We've looked at his academic idiocy. It really was, folks. It's unbelievable. People believe him to be a genius. He was a bumbling fool, academic idiot. But let's look at the theories themselves. You know, his relativity theory, his speed of light theory, constancy of the speed of light. Is there any truth to that? Let's take a look. For example, the constancy of the speed of light. Let's take a moment and put that under the spotlight, if you will, pardon the pun. The late physicist Brian G. Wallace discovered in 1961 that radar distance measurements of the surface of Venus did not conform to the constancy of the speed of light. He checked and rechecked his data. There was no question that his findings were correct. But his every attempt to publish his findings in physics journals were vehemently blocked. Ooh, do I smell conspiracy here? Of course. Whenever scientific findings are made that don't conform with the status quo, they're blacklisted. Oh, I could spend the rest of the show just citing examples over and over of this type of thing that's gone on, but we'll save that for another show. But believe me, the history record is replete with examples of this, and it still goes on, of course, to today. Anyway, the ridicule and suppression that this man experienced convinced him that a conspiracy was at work. Finally, physics today published a letter that he wrote summarizing his findings. In it, he stated, the 1961 interplanetary radar contact with Venus presented the first opportunity to overcome technological limitations and perform direct experiments of Einstein's second postulate of a constant light speed of c in space. When the radar calculations were based on the postulate, the observed computed residuals ranged to over 3 milliseconds of the expected error of 10 microseconds from the best general relativity fit the Lincoln Lab could generate, a variation range of over 30,000%. An analysis of the data showed a component that was relativistic in a C plus V Galilean sense. In other words, what he's saying here is the discrepancy in what was predicted and what was actually observed was over 30,000%. That's a major, massive difference. In other words, he found out that the Einsteinian theory of the constancy of the speed of light did not apply across the board. There were exceptions for unknown reasons, but exceptions nonetheless. And it's true, folks. The speed of light is not constant, and it's not a barrier. You can't break the speed of light. It's just another fairy tale. And there's reasons why they do this. I'll get to that momentarily. Wallace said some other interesting. Continuing on with Wallace here. Again, this is the guy that discovered discrepancies with radar data from Venus. They were bouncing radar off the planet Venus, and it wasn't returning in the expected time. And he was finding, this is what led him to do further research, and he was finding that there were a lot of exceptions to this supposed law of the constancy of the speed of light. Wallace claimed that NASA has been aware of this discrepancy all along, and incorporates non-relativistic components into their calculations of data transmission times for their planetary exploration spacecraft. In other words, they know about this discrepancy, and they've been compensating for it all along and not telling us about it. He further claimed that this was and is being done in order to keep the public in ignorance and maintain a monopoly on technology by thwarting progress being made by potential competitors in the high-tech world. Doesn't it make sense, folks? The elites, like everything else, they want a monopoly on technology. They got a monopoly on power, a monopoly on money. They want a monopoly on technology as well. And what better way to keep you behind than to keep touting this lie of Einstein so that every scientific theory, every new invention and development will always be thwarted. You will only go so far and then you'll have to stop because you run into discrepancies and you can't harmonize it with Einstein's untouchable law. And so you think that the problem lies in your theory or your invention, and so you scrap the whole idea, discouraged, you crumple everything up and throw it in the trash, when in reality what you found was major, important, revolutionary. But you thought it was all flawed, all wrong, because you couldn't harmonize it with what you thought was an untouchable law of physics, Einstein's so-called original theory. You get it? I mean, it's to their great advantage to do this kind of thing, and that's exactly what they're doing. Wallace also later stated, and I quote, at the December 1974 AAS, that's the American Astronomical Society Dynamical Astronomy Meeting, E.M. Standish Jr. of JPL, that's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, reported that significant unexplained systematic variations existed in all the interplanetary data, and that they are forced to use empirical correction factors that have no theoretical foundation. So here we go. We got confirmation that this was in fact taking place. There were these discrepancies and they weren't accounting for them, weren't even trying to. In fact, they were hiding them, covering them up. In a paper that he wrote in 1973, Wallace described how Lincoln Lab introduced averaging to suppress the anomalous radar results and refused to release the raw data to him, stonewalling his investigation. They were using averaging. We'll just round off the numbers here so it doesn't look like there's any discrepancies. Unbelievable. When you're dealing with steering planetary spacecraft, you don't average, folks. You have to be precise. You're off 1 second of arc of a degree, and you could miss, say, the planet Mars by millions of miles by the time you reached it. They know this. They're suppressing it, according to Wallace, and I don't doubt it. So here we go. The implications of Einsteinian fraud are massive, are monumental, and they're still continuing it to this day. So they can, amongst other things, maintain their monopoly on technology and in science. A subsequent letter that Wallace submitted for publication in 1984 in Physics Today was flatly denied. He wanted to reveal his findings. They turned him down. Why? Does this sound like a scientific journal is interested in getting the truth out to the public? No. They want to suppress it. Like Popular Mechanics and their supposed refutation of 9/11 conspiracies. Oh, give me a break. What a bunch of crap that was. Don't forget, it was written by a cousin of Chertoff. Talk about nepotism. Anyway, the discrepancy that Wallace was studying is the main reason why there is so much trouble today harmonizing quantum physics with everyday physics. The macro and micro worlds seem out of sync mathematically. Can it be that the elites of the scientific world are hiding something? Absolutely, folks. They got everybody chasing shadows. All because, primarily, the Einstein fraud. No matter. They at least want to preserve the Einstein fable, regardless of the monopoly on science and technology that it gives them. It's been great, manipulation propaganda. Officialdom, regardless of any monopolistic tendencies, has always been slow to acknowledging error and always will be. On that basis alone, they're never going to admit that Einstein is a fraud now. That would be a major embarrassment to them, if nothing else. They're never going to admit it, folks. As a whole, a few here and there might come out and risk their careers, but the system itself, they're going to maintain this Einstein fairy tale through time immemorial. So therefore, it's up to the individual, like Wallace, to attempt to break down such barriers and pass on their findings to those with open minds. Naturally, when all theories and discoveries are fit into a present framework that is flawed, the results will always be flawed. I wonder how many inventions were trashed, how many great discoveries were thrown in the scrap heap because they couldn't be harmonized with Einsteinian physics, when in reality the problem was with Einstein and not these inventors and thinkers. Disgusting, folks, the way they thwart progress, just like the oil monopolies, People come up with ideas like the electric car or the water-powered car, which are not only cheaper but safer for the environment, healthier. They don't care, no. The monopolies want to maintain their monopolies, so they buy off our congressmen. They suppress these discoveries. They'll even kill inventors if they have to that threaten their monopoly. Sickening, the way this whole system works. Anyway, let me continue on here. But the simple fact is, folks, even if Einstein's unoriginal theories did correctly make accurate predictions, such as, the 1919 solar eclipse phenomenon, this wouldn't in and of itself make relativity a fact anyway. A good example of this is how the theory of geocentrism had made predictions that actually came true. But it turns out that the theory of geocentrism is false. That the Earth is at the center of the universe. So even if Einstein's prediction did come true, and it didn't, they fabricated the data, but even if it did come true, it doesn't mean necessarily that the theory was correct. But it didn't come true. That's the whole point. Relativity has not been proven. And by the way, when they tell you that relativity has been proven, most of the time they'll cite the 1919 eclipse as proof. Well, look what happened in 1919. They proved it. Isn't that interesting? Well, what about experiments since then? They're lying to us, folks. They're making this stuff up, or they're just blindly touting the same lies that they've been told and don't know better, although I would argue a great many of them do know better. Once something is put in place, once something becomes status quo, you will almost never see it questioned again. And if you do, that person's going to have the axe come down on him. So why is Einstein so popular? Why has he become the god of physics, if you will? Perhaps because he was a staunch supporter of world government. Einstein was a major New World Order tramp. As time went on, he unfortunately became a cheerleader for the New World Order. Was he fooled, or was he just trying to fool others? Well, I'll let you decide that for yourself, but let's look at some interesting statements that he made regarding the New World Order. He said, a world federation, referring to the United Nations, presupposes a new kind of loyalty on the part of man, a sense of responsibility that does not stop short at the national boundaries. Understanding among different cultural groups, mutual economic and cultural aid are the necessary additions. Here's another statement he made. Hey, tons of them. Anybody who really wants to abolish war must absolutely declare himself in favor of his own country's resigning a portion of its sovereignty in favor of international institutions. He must be ready to make his own country amenable, in case of a dispute, to the award of an international court. He must, in the most uncompromising fashion, support disarmament all around. Woo! You don't get more globalist than that now, do you? See, folks, if you get globalist stuff, you can become a famous scientist even though you can't count on your own fingers. But the other point I want to drive home here is that Einstein was a hardcore Zionist. Now there's the real secret behind his success right there. He once said, I get the most joy from the emergence of the Jewish state in Palestine. I get the most joy from seeing the Palestinians driven out of their homeland and having their homeland taken over by these foreign invaders. In 1930, some German Jews, again, you can't call these people anti-Semites, they were Jews. In 1930, some German Jews recognized the danger of Zionist racism and demanded that Einstein stop using his scientific fame to promote racism, disloyalty, and interracial strife in the name of Zionism. On December 7th, 1930, the New York Times reported on this matter, stating, it's very interesting, this is what the New York Times said, the National German Jewish Union, that's the collective body of people I was just talking about, these are Jews, the National German Jewish Union, a small group of extreme nationalists and anti-Zionist Jews, protested against Professor Einstein using his world fame as a scientist for propagating Zionism. So there you go, folks. This is the real reason why Mr. Einstein became so famous and still retains that fame today. He's a Zionist, or was a Zionist. And that's why the Holocaust fraud is perpetrated. And that's why people get arrested and jailed for years on end if they question the Holocaust, because the Zionists who have been running the show have set it up that way. And people keep putting up with it. Unbelievable. So, anybody doubt that Einstein is a fraud? I didn't get any calls. Having anybody wanting to debate that, I guess everyone's agreeing. That's good. Anyway, perhaps the whole mess was best summed up by Peter Rogers, the mess of the Einstein cult, in an editorial that he wrote in the August 2004 edition of Physics World magazine. He's, in fact, the editor of the magazine. Listen to what he wrote. His, meaning Einstein's, legacy as the greatest physicist of all time is guaranteed despite the regular claims that Einstein was wrong or that he stole his ideas from someone else. The real opportunity presented by 2005 is the chance to sell Einstein and physics to the young. Physicists have to realize that physics needs the outside world more than it needs physics. Physics as a subject is lucky in having Einstein as a brand. So there you go. He admitted here that the whole reason for pushing Einstein, at least as far as he's concerned, is to make science and more specifically physics more appealing to the public. He's become a status symbol, and he's helped to popularize physics and attracted the young to physics. But he's acknowledging here, kind of with a tongue-in-cheek fashion, but still acknowledging nonetheless, that Einstein was perhaps wrong, and that he did in fact copy from others. But we're going to pawn him off on the public anyway, because he has already been established as an icon in the public eye, and we're not going to change that now. You get it, folks? See how this whole system works? It is. It is how it works. It works that way in the religious world. You know, certain dogmas that were invented as the centuries rolled on, you know, they're taught today as absolute fact, and you're a heretic if you question them, and they'll blacklist you, blackball you. In previous ages, they burn you at the stake when they themselves don't even believe in the things, but they have to keep their jobs or their lives. All fields of study work this way. I don't care what it is. Once something becomes established fact, regardless how it became established fact, whether it was originally believed or not, and then later they didn't want to admit when they found out it was wrong, or if they lied from the start, it doesn't matter. Once it becomes established fact, you don't question it, nobody else questions it, or you're toast. And so here we are. Another pillar falls today, folks. The sacred Einsteinian pillar of physics is cracked and filled with holes. It's time to get rid of it. So now, guess what? We're free to start thinking for ourselves. Now we can look at other theories. We can start inventing things that look at the possibility of exceeding the speed of light. Maybe distant space travel is possible after all. We've been told, oh, no, it's not possible because you can't exceed the speed of light. Hogwash, folks. It's all a scam. Because Einstein was a scam. His theories were a scam. Einstein wasn't even a genius. He couldn't handle the simple mathematics entry exam into the engineering school he wanted to get into. Come on, it's time to put it to bed, once and for all. Anyway, I said if I had time, I'd look at a few more quotes from Einstein, showing what a globalist he was. So let me just look at some more of these gems here. Einstein said, "We must not be merely willing, but actively eager to submit ourselves to the binding authority necessary for world security." See how he played the little game? Touting off world government as a means of security. Isn't that what we're told in the wake of 9/11? Give up your rights and we'll give you security. Come on, with the oldest scam in the book, as though that's going to make you secure anyway, when you got wide open borders. Our borders are less secure than they were before 9/11, and they're telling us they're keeping us secure. Just give up more of your rights, and we'll continue to keep you secure with wide open borders. Oh, boy, there's a sucker born every millisecond in this country. Here's another quote from the fraudulent, alleged genius scientist. "Any government is certain to be evil to some extent, but a world government is preferable to the far greater evil of wars." Oh, let me tell you, folks. Wars don't just consist of army tanks on the battlefield. There's a war being waged against us right now as we speak. Our jobs are being stolen, our homes are being stolen, our dollars being devaluated, our public treasury is being raped. That's the real war going on today. They're telling you that that's all good, though. You should like that in preference to the battlefield. Well, guess what? They stage all those wars, too. These scumbags that are pulling the strings behind the curtain are responsible for all of this. All of the world's miseries, all the wars we fight, all the phony manipulations of our economy. But this supposed genius scientist here wants you to think that you're going to escape the battlefield if you just give yourself over to these tyrant wannabes who want to suck you dry and are sucking you dry. So much for his geniusness. If he was a genius, he would have seen through this scam. He did see through this scam. And he wasn't a genius. Anyway, he loved this scam. He was a Zionist, folks. There's another quote from the genius wannabe. "The only salvation for civilization lies in the creation of a world government." The only salvation! With security of nations founded upon law. Ooh, haven't we heard that kind of statement before? The rule of law. I've heard George Bush Sr. use it, Bill Clinton used it. Anyway, as long as sovereign states continue to have separate armaments and armament secrets, new world wars will be inevitable. Well, we don't have to worry about armament secrets with Israel around. We give them our military secrets all the time, and they turn around and sell them to China. Oh, boy, this is unflippin' believable, man. It sounds like I'm quoting from Henry Kissinger here, who's made many statements like that. Give up your sovereignty. Yes, in order for us to totally control you stupid masses, you all have to give up your national sovereignty. And then, when we have accomplished this, I will require you to all bow, worship me, and kiss my hairy hind parts. I just want to vomit when I read kind of so genius, my foot. Let's look at some other interesting quotes from this Nimrod. Here's one. Only two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. Yeah, spoken by a true idiot himself. Who would know better but him? All right, folks, that's it. I got a few more things I didn't cover, but I covered the main points. If you want the notes, once again, email me. I'll send them off to you. Here goes another pillar of unquestionable truth crashing to the ground.